Hello, and welcome to the Vulnerability Junkies podcast. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Jamie. On this podcast, we talk about the scary, vulnerable parts of our personal and professional growth, our identities as second-generation Asian Canadians, and talking about our feelings.
You've heard his name. Now it's time for you to hear his voice.
Today, in conversation with special guest, Owen, we talk about following the path of least regret, prototyping our way through life, how we face our fears, and everything in between. Let's get into it. Hello, hello.
All right, we're back. Today's going to be a special episode. We're joined for our first guest ever. Say hello, Owen.
Hello, hello.
So Owen is one of my really close friends. Before talking to Kevin about a lot of this mental model, like a much earlier era in my life, Owen was the person that was always getting the fire hose of that. So very grateful to have him here. He's in San Francisco just briefly, and thought it would be only appropriate for him to be the first guest.
Welcome to the pod, Owen.
Wow, thank you. I'm so honored.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So you want to talk a bit about how you guys originally met?
Yeah. So if people have been listening really carefully to the pod, you've actually already heard Owen's name brought up a couple times. He played this really important, pivotal role in my life where when I transitioned from one friend group to the other, so from last episode, talked about going from not having a support network to having a support network of friends. And Owen was like really crucial in that transition where back in 2013, when we were both interns in the Bay Area, Owen was the de facto event organizer for all the Bay Area intern events. And he was the hub for those events, but he was also kind of the hub for how I ended up meeting a lot of people in my support network now. And during that time was definitely the person that was also, aside from all the mental model, also getting all of the whitey, like, oh my God, who am I? And like, oh my God, like, what are relationships even? How does dating work? And we commiserated over Wang Fu. That's like my memory of the initial couple months of us meeting.
I mean, it sounds pretty accurate, but it's definitely not like a one-way commiseration, right? I think part of why we bonded as friends is there was a lot of that coming from my side too. You know, it was a mutual whining together.
Yes, much much just like being sad boys over people we were missing.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's real.
So before we get into the subject matter of what we're actually talking about today, let's go through our normal thing. Like, how y'all feeling? How you feeling today, Owen?
I'm feeling pretty good. Probably 8s on physical. Is that what you guys say? Like
Yeah. You got it.
Yeah. I took a nap earlier today, so feel pretty good. Emotional, probably 7 or 8 as well.
Ooh. Okay.
It's popping.
If you were to try to give a different label of that good, what does good mean here?
I'm feeling excited. I think this is it's an exciting opportunity to be here, but at the same time also a bit anxious.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a bit anxious because I've never done something like this before, so I don't know how it'll turn out.
All right. That's definitely how I felt when I first started podcasting, and it's still regularly how I feel on every episode. So totally natural that you would feel a little anxious going into this.
Those two things generally come hand in hand.
Yeah, excitement and anxiety.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Or specifically when you're about to do something that's, I think, good. That's like in the growth zone.
Yeah.
It's like a hallmark feature. So
yeah,
exciting stuff.
Totally. How you feeling, Kevin?
I think I'm 6s across the board. Like physically about a 6. Woke up early, exercise in the morning, so feeling pretty tired. But emotionally like 6 pushing 7.
Okay.
I think emotionally I'm like elated.
Okay, buddy.
Yeah, feeling good. Yeah. And you?
I think physically I'm at like an 8 right now. I am finally like properly well rested after a couple of days of being pretty drained from not sleeping enough and having way too much social time. Definitely had my social battery like 100% drained on a number of days in a row. So Owen and I were both at this it's like climate tech event for the last couple of days, and there was a point, I think it was on first and second night, where Owen came over being like, man, like I'm kind of drained. And I was like, I'm fine, I'm going to keep going. And then like 20 minutes later, I'm like, I cannot speak anymore. Like the part of my brain that generates conversation is now off. So the last couple of days I've been just trying to rest more or less. So but if I get down, and emotionally, yeah, I'm a little like jittery, just very energized, excited. Yeah, almost uncomfortably so.
Do you want to take a breath?
Yeah, we as part of prepping for this, like we like write down cues for ourselves, and the thing that I always have written in front of me is slow, which applies not only for improving delivery but just for calming down. So it's a good cue. All right,
You want to introduce
yeah,
the topic of the day?
So back in this era of like 2014, 2015, Owen wrote quite a lot. This is also the era where we were like running around doing different kinds of adventures together pretty frequently. And there's one particular post that I think about all the time where you wrote about this idea of like path of least regret. So do you remember like what, I should know the answer to this. Do you remember what prompted you to write that specific post?
I know that's where I got the name from. Was I was studying ECU, so electrical and computer engineering. And one of the concepts in electrical engineering is path of least resistance. So resistors.
That's pretty
Had
good.
to,
I had no idea it came from this nerdy ability. Oh my God.
okay. I won't bother explaining it then.
No, that's what keep
Okay.
going. Like, this explanation is great. I just think it's hilarious.
Yeah, so the path of least resistance in electrical engineering is resistors. I don't even know how you explain a resistor.
When you describe this, I'm just imagining like an op amp. Like,
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my God. I haven't heard that word in so long.
Yeah. Circuits land.
Yeah. All right. The idea of path of least resistance in circuits is that the current will tend to flow down the path in a balanced way based on resistance. So if there's more resistance on a certain path, less current will go down that way. If there's more resistance, or if there's less resistance, more current will go down that way. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Clearly, I spent much less time thinking about path of least resistance and much more time thinking about path of least regret. So,
As it should be.
Nice.
but yeah, you can kind of apply the same concepts to life as well. If you think about it, in life, we often just take the path that is the least resistance, right? Like,
Yeah.
we fall into relationships, we fall out of relationships, we fall into jobs, we just go hang out with friends because it's the easy thing to do. And I don't remember exactly how I came up with the idea of path of least regret, but I do know that it guided a lot of my thinking back then of when I'm trying to make a decision about something, trying to think about what would future me be least likely to regret of the decisions that I'm choosing, regardless of how it turns out. And that's generally the path that I would try to take in that situation.
Yeah, totally. Like, and I think it's interesting as an explicit juxtaposition from path of least resistance, and that they're usually almost the opposite.
Right.
Like the path of least resistance is you just keep doing what you're doing, or do the thing that's the least scary, because things being scary is a form of resistance. But it sounds like you came to this realization that going down the path of least resistance was going to lead to a life that was not the life that you wanted to live. Whereas path of least regret, almost by definition, would hopefully lead you down the path that you would feel the most settled on year after year.
Yep. And so far, it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah. Tell me about a time when this decision framework helped you do something theory.
Yeah, I'd say the most recent example of this was a couple months back. I did a stage at one of my favorite restaurants.
You want to include what a stage is? Because that is not a
Okay.
word that I hear very frequently.
A stage is an unpaid internship at a restaurant where you work in the kitchen, and it's generally meant to be a trial period where you work there a bit, and then eventually you might become full-time if they think you're worthy.
Okay.
Yeah, so how this happened was I follow this restaurant, Atelier. It's a restaurant in Ottawa. I follow them on Instagram, and a couple months back, I saw them post an Instagram story. It was a Q&A session. Some Instagram follower sent in a question asking, hey, can non-chefs apply for internships here? Do you need restaurant experience to work here? And they responded, no, anyone can just send in their resume and apply. And so I'd say this was a moment where I, following the framework of path of least regret, thought, you know what, I should just apply for this. I basically have no experience. It's pretty scary, but it's one of my favorite restaurants. I love cooking and always wanted to work in fine dining. And I thought, if I just don't apply for this, then nothing will come out of it.
Yeah.
But if I apply for this, possibly nothing will come out of it, but also possibly something interesting could. So might as well just apply. Yeah. So when I applied, I kind of actually just forgot about it. And a couple weeks later, the head chef responded saying, yeah, you can come in sometime. And I think that's the moment when it became real. And in that moment, I definitely felt a lot of fear of, well, holy shit, what am I doing? Like, I don't have an experience. What if I get laughed out of the kitchen? I think that me in that future state was still glad that past me had applied for it. And I thought, well, I'm going to go take this opportunity. I'm not often going to get a chance like this, so might as well go for it.
I'm curious to dig into that a little bit more. Like this recent example, it sounds like you're at this point very well practiced in using the framework. What goes on in your head when this moment comes up, right? Because it's like, what I'm hearing is an opportunity will come up, and then there's kind of a point where you're at a fork in the road.
Yeah.
You're like, thing to do this seems kind of scary and kind of deviates from what I guess you would consider normal. What does that internal dialogue sound like in your mind?
Yeah, good question. When I feel pushback from my internal dialogue, I try to question, what is that pushback from? And so when I apply this framework, it helps me bring some clarity to that pushback, and it helps me overcome it. If that makes any sense.
So it sounds like you're disentangling this kind of visceral sense of pushback. Like you feel the resistance, and maybe before you had this framework, you just listen to that resistance, being like, okay, like seems like I don't want to do this. We shouldn't do it. Whereas now it sounds like you're better at decomposing what exactly is going on in that mess. You're able to identify fear as one of the predominant elements, and then think back to this idea of path of least regret.
Yeah, it sounds more sophisticated than what's going on ahead. But yes.
Yeah, just to pull on that thread a little more, like I think one thing I'm really curious to learn about is how you put your finger on what it is you're going to regret. Because it sounds like the framework really kicks in when you're able to say, like, this is a thing that I think I will regret, therefore I should do this. And I'm asking because the example that you're bringing up is like specifically this fear, right? I'm hearing that like you would regret not doing this just because you were afraid. And otherwise, without the fear, you would have totally done it.
Right.
And that's something that I think about a lot for myself. So I'm curious if there are other things that you think you might regret, or is it always a regret of, like, I guess, not doing something only because you were afraid?
I think I generally have a pretty clear sense of what I'm optimizing for in any given part of my life. So, for example, what Jamie mentioned about earlier in our life, like 2014-ish time period, what I was generally optimizing for was having fun adventures, having good stories come out of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm usually pushing back against with path of least regret is like going on more interesting trips with friends, going to do things that I would feel uncomfortable doing normally. But I think as I've gotten older, that's become less and less the case. I think maybe just from having had enough experiences, a lot of times I don't feel the need to go out of my way to do unusual or just experiences that I think younger me would have opted for. More often than not, actually, I think path of least regret these days takes me to a place of being more disciplined and optimizing for things for my own health, right? So instead of going out to a party that I feel kind of meh about, and maybe I feel some discomfort about because there's like some social anxiety, but I know that I've experienced enough of these parties that I know what it'll feel like. I'd rather stay at home because I know I'm optimizing for my health. Like sleep matters more to me now as I get older, that I'd rather optimize for that.
Yeah. So it sounds like over time you refine the kinds of things that you would regret. Like I'm thinking back to this Korean restaurant we went to in LA. So like we went to this restaurant in LA where they had this crazy eating challenge. Where can you describe what the eating challenge was? I don't remember exactly the details of it.
Yeah. So the eating challenge was eating a giant bowl of noodles. Noodles is one of my favorite foods, so of course I was definitely down for this. The one bowl was about equivalent to 3 large bowls. So imagine like when you go to a full restaurant, you get the large bowl, right? It's already a pretty large bowl. It's like that size bowl, but there was 3 of those, and then it was extra spicy. It was like a ton of chili powder in it, and then there were 20 eggs in it. And what's kind of funny about that is that shortly before this time period, I had been allergic to eggs. But then after enough trial and error, somehow I just stopped being allergic to eggs. And I figured, okay, I think I'm probably okay at this point to eat 20 eggs again.
So I'm bringing up this story because I think at the time you really were following path of least regret, and you're like, this is going to be a great story.
Yes.
But I feel like if you were to encounter the situation now, you would recognize like, I will regret what this will do to my body. And I remember when this happened, I can't remember who it was, but one of our friends was live streaming this. And then your parents were watching. And then afterwards, they're like, what are you doing? Because I think they had the mentality that's close to what you have now of recognizing that your future self will actually regret the like bodily damage you're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
So in the case of going back to the Italian example, also like I just want to hype you up a little bit more in that this was not just like a random small restaurant. Italia is like one of the nicest restaurants in Ottawa. This is not like you're like asked to go work at the Burger King. Like this is like a really fancy place that I think that you explained something to me about how one of the interesting things about the place is just the sheer number of dishes. Like how many dishes do they do per serving now?
Right. They do a 44-course tasting menu.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
That is a lot.
Right.
Like,
So this is a
wow.
pretty distinct kind of restaurant experience.
Yeah.
And the thing I wanted to get a little bit more is the first time you told me the story, you just said like, yeah, like I heard about this opportunity, and then I decided, okay, this sounds interesting. I'm going to apply for it. And then the second time you told me the story, you explained to me what your actual like internal experience was at the point when you were deciding to apply for this. Can you talk a little more about that? Like what was actually going on for you when you're thinking about applying for this?
So I think when I was thinking about applying for it wasn't that bad. It was just like, you know what? Path of least regret. I think it would be better to apply for this than to not. It's a future me problem, whether or not something comes out of it. It was more the days leading up to it that the emotions were stronger. Pretty much like the week leading up to it, I had a hard time sleeping because I kept having dreams about getting kicked out of the kitchen. The whole day before, I basically couldn't do anything anymore because I was like non-functional because I was like, what if I just completely do a terrible job at this? I knew that in actuality, there wasn't any like serious consequences from this, no matter how poorly it could have gone. But the fear was definitely real of leading up to it, the anxiety of what the experience actually would have been.
Gotcha. So to dig more into like Kevin's question here, in that moment, what was the regret that you feared? Like if you had not applied for it, what do you think you would have regretted here?
Good question.
I'm asking it in part because like it seems like most of earlier life was really about you would have regretted feeling fearful and regretted not having the interesting stories you have. And then in later life, you would have regretted doing things that prevent you from being healthy. But I'm not sure really where exactly this one falls.
Yeah, I think this one's not really related to either of them. Well, I think partly it is still a good story, but one that's more relevant to my current interests. It doesn't compromise my health. It's aligned with my interests. But I think the bigger one is actually just growth. Cooking is something that I've actually put a lot of effort into advancing my skill set at. And I know that working in fine dining would push it along even farther. And this was a clear opportunity for me to get that fine dining experience.
So it sounds like the earlier framing of it being predominantly about regretting not having interesting stories to tell. This one sounds like it would have been more regret of turning down this amazing opportunity for growth.
Yes.
And it's much more, it's not just like, what is the craziest thing to do? It's like, what is the thing that is actually most aligned with the growth path that you set for yourself?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. What's going on for you, Kevin?
Bunch of things. I think it's cool to hear about how essentially your priorities have changed over the years and evolved and matured in a way where 8-9 years ago, it was a lot more about pushing into like new horizons and new experiences and kind of overcoming any type of fear or resistance around, I guess, stood between you and getting those experiences. And it sounds like to a degree, you were able to maximally explore that in a way and have kind of like come back to a health-centric, more routine, regularity. The word like peace and like calmness comes to mind, like maintaining that. I forget the word now. There's a biology term for like homeostasis. Yeah, like physical homeostasis, but also like emotional homeostasis. Like maintaining that is kind of what I'm hearing is like pretty important to you now. And I also just wanted to make some space to like for that fear that you had. Like the way that you were describing it is it's pretty visceral. It's like physically affecting you and like you can't sleep, like you're not able to show up. And it does sound like I'm imagining if I was in your shoes, like knowing what I know about you and how much you care about food and cooking and how much like years that you've put into like developing that craft. I'm hearing that like taking this stage on was also kind of like, fine dining is kind of like some form of pinnacle, right? of the craft, and it feels like it was almost a test in a way. It's like I put in all these years of effort, and there's kind of this moment of wow, like am I gonna crash and burn? Like am I way worse than I thought I would be? Right? There's kind of like there's an identity component, I think, that's like really tied up in that, and it feels like this growth opportunity for you required you to risk that part of your identity, and so it makes sense to me that it would be like really intense.
Wow, yeah, I've never thought about it like that. That makes a lot of sense, and I think you've got it pretty spot on.
Yeah. So all that is to say, I think it's really cool that you stretch for it, because I think identity is just so core. Like you think about the hierarchy of needs, identity needs are so foundational. Yeah. It's really cool that you pushed it out there, because it's the other side of that is that, typically the amount of fear tends to be proportional to like how much of a growth opportunity is for you. So I'm here to now like talk about the flip side. Like you've done it. How was it?
I think I credit a lot of it to the fact that the whole staff was incredibly welcoming and nice. It was nothing like, I don't know, Hell's Kitchen or one of those shows that you see of what working in a fine dining kitchen is like. And yeah, it was, when I first stepped in, I definitely felt a lot of discomfort and fear, feeling like I don't belong. But it quickly faded when they just put me to work and were very welcoming with tips and advice on the tasks I was told to do. And I came out of it learning a lot. I took like pages of notes. I came out of it feeling fairly accomplished. I didn't give anyone food poisoning or anything like that. So
wow, that's like wow, that's real. Dang.
Yeah, well, the framing that Kevin was giving this whole experience around identity is making me think back to all of these events in your life leading up to this, because like this was definitely pushing yourself, but it was not like this weird isolated event that had no connection. Like I'd seen you stretch yourself into things that were very clearly not path of least resistance over and over and over again in this direction over many, many years. And I don't think you really noticed the pattern before. You definitely spent, how long did you spend in Hong Kong, like working in kitchen?
about a month.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I love the courage to like explore really far outside of your normal work. So for context, you want to explain a bit about what you do for work?
I'm a software engineer, currently an engineering manager.
Right. So like, that's like the more traditional path. Again, parts of that at least are path of least resistance, and that it's relatively secure path. But for a long time, you've had this passion around food. And I remember the way that I remember your journey through Hong Kong was in part to specifically explore what it would be like to in industry, to like really work in the kitchens there. Was that also like a path of least regret decision?
I don't know if that was really guided by path of least regret. I think that was actually guided by just a different idea.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have talked about this before, the whole designing your life thing.
I don't think so.
Okay, so this is great. This is another thing I can attribute to Owen. So whenever Owen reads books and he really likes, he like buys like 12 copies and sends to all of his friends. So I think this must have been like 20. Do you remember when you sent this book to everyone?
Probably 2016, 2017.
Okay, I'll explain like my experience with this. I'm going to throw it back to you afterwards. So in 2016, Owen bought this book called Designing Your Life. This book is about taking a design-centric approach to figuring out a life path. So what design-centric means here is rather than going through some really complex analysis and then coming up with a single answer, you come up with many answers. You figure out prototypes for each of those. For instance, in user interface design, a prototype is usually like a simplified version of the final interface that you then go test with users. In this book, Design Your Life, a prototype is going to try out and try to emulate what a life path would be like before you commit to it. So for instance, like last year, I ran a prototype of what it would be like to be a climate tech angel investor. And this book has been super helpful to me. So I love that this is like the thing that guided you into your journey in Hong Kong. So tell me more about how you use this book to help guide you to this decision to work in Hong Kong.
Yeah, so when I went through the framework of prototyping what different life paths could look like, the default one is, of course, continuing as a software engineer, but an alternate one was becoming a chef of some kind. And at that time when I was working at the startup, outside of the hours I'm working at the startup, I pretty much spent all my free time cooking in some form or other, hosting dinner parties, reading food-related books, trying to just improve my cooking craft. And after things didn't work out with that job, I thought this was actually a good chance for me to prototype. What would it be like if I live this alternate life of working in a kitchen. And so that was what guided me to go pursue that opportunity.
So there's a lot more stuff to dig into here about like this journey to prototyping, but I've learned it's important in communication to not be grilling people. So want to find some way for all to know each other pretty well. And I think that this point of connection around pursuing things to push the fears and to drive towards growth is something that like I know a lot about both of you in this, and I kind of just want to watch that unfold and just like sit back and watch how you get to know each other in this way.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I know Jamie fairly well, but I think from listening to the podcast, I feel like I know you very well, but it's probably a one-way relationship,
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, on this particular path of least regrets, there's one podcast episode where you guys talked about, I think, language learning, and how you said if you were trying to learn a language, you would just move to a foreign country, start working in a cafe or something like that, and just learn that way. And I immediately resonated. I was like, yes, this is exactly what I would do too. Path of least regret.
My people.
Worst case scenario, I end up failing at learning the language. Best case scenario, I've got an amazing story out of this. I've mastered the language, and yeah, everything would be amazing. And yeah, so I think we have a lot of similar vibes in some of this growth areas.
Nice. Yeah, I'm curious, like to pick at that a little bit, like which part of it resonated with you, because I have a hunch that if you're also a dark energy person, we're gonna connect on that. So yeah, I'm curious, like when you hear that, like which specific part of it really resonated?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it is true. The dark energy thing, I think, actually does not resonate with me.
Okay.
But
nice.
it's the going hard. I don't know. It's maybe there's a light energy way at going hard.
Yes, that is the path that I'm like forever seeking, but it just hasn't come to me yet. But interesting is it's hearing that it's just the degree to which it's like maximum effort kind of that really resonates.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, like the way that. So it was interesting when you brought the dark energy thing. My immediate response is, Owen doesn't really feed off dark energy the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that I would kind of separate your different experiences from my perspective is, and when there's something that's interesting to you, you'll look at it and be like, yeah, this doesn't seem like it'd be that hard. I'll work in this fine dining kitchen, it'll be fine. Like, I just think you don't really confront how difficult the thing is until you're right about to do it. And you're like, oh God, what did I sign up for?
Right.
Whereas I feel like, Kevin, you're like, that looks impossible. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to get destroyed. It's going to be great. And it's like a little bit of a different motivation.
Yeah. I think that part like is interesting to pick at in my journey to discover the light powered, light energy powered path. Yeah. Can you walk me through how, like, so you discover a challenge that is, it seems pretty intimidating, doing the stage, for example, because similar to what Jamie was describing, like when I seek out these environments, I'm like maximum pain equals maximum velocity of learning. And so through that logic, I embrace the pain. I'm like, yeah, this is great. Like if I'm just going to suck for a long time, but net spending time here constantly, like a good example of this is taking dance classes. Yeah. I constantly jump into dance classes that are like at least 2x my level, where everyone is better than me. I'm easily the worst person in the room. And like every minute spent in that class is just like reality smacking me with, you suck at dancing. You suck at dancing. And then I'm just like, yeah, I do. I look around and I'm like, look at all these people though. Like if I can just learn to keep showing up, even though it's incredibly embarrassing and soul crushing, I will just eventually acclimate and adapt. And this is just going to be my new norm. And then fast forward 6 months, like I'm going to be way better. Like that's how I think about these situations, but it sounds like that's not how you approach these things. So I'm curious, like, what is your experience?
Yeah, I don't know if my experience is helpful here. I think part of it is I'm actually very forgetful. So
wait, that's hilarious.
So I just don't remember a lot of the bad things that have happened to me. So when I go into when I like sign up for a scary situation, I don't really think about the scariness of it when I'm signing up for it. I'm just like, oh, this is the thing. I'm just gonna go do this thing. I forget all the pain I've experienced in similar situations in the past. And so it just doesn't seem like that big a deal when I sign up for it. When I'm thrown into it, then I start feeling the pain.
Yeah.
Maybe one difference there is one of the other topics you guys talked about before was talk to yourself, like talking to your inner child, like being kinder to yourself. I don't think I have this inner dialogue of like, oh, you suck, like go suck at it. I think, what is my inner dialogue saying?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. What is your inner dialogue saying?
So the most recent example of being thrown into a situation and it feeling really bad was actually this weekend, the climate conference that Jamie and I went to. A lot of the time, I just felt completely out of my depth.
So yeah, I mean, I got to be like side by side with you during that, and I eventually moved to the same place. But when you were in these situations where you're like, oh man, like, am I interesting enough to talk to these people? Like, do I really know my stuff? Am I making a fool of myself? Like, what is the actual internal chatter in your mind during those moments?
Yeah, I think in my mind, I actually don't think, oh, I suck at this thing. Or it's not like I suck. It's more like, oh man, this feels really bad, but I know I gotta just get past this to grow.
Sounds so healthy.
Wait, but the interesting thing to pick at here is like, what is the energy that is associated with that idea of I got to get past this to grow, though, right? And I'm curious, like, how you, because eventually, like, I've heard you say that, like, you know, you're pretty forgetful about your previous experiences of signing up for something that's way beyond you, and then eventually, there does come a point where you have to do the thing, and then it kind of hits you in the face. You're like, oh wow, this is pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
Like, how do you cope with that? Like, what does processing that look like to you? Because eventually, you get to the point where you push through it, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's going on internally. I just know that I internalize that it feels bad, but I know that I can get through it. Like,
yeah. I mean, the way that I'm thinking about like what each of the three of us do in situations like this, and I feel like Kevin's response is, "Oh yeah, this is painful. Give me more." Your response is like, "Oh man, this sucks. Nah, I'm gonna keep going."
Right.
Whereas like my default response that I'm working with is to get super neurotic and be like, oh my God, I can't handle this. I need to get out of here right now. And I feel like even though you do end up in these situations where you feel exhausted and it's intense, the sense I get externally anyway is that you're not neurotic about it. You don't like get super anxious in that state. You're just like a little maybe disappointed or just tired, but there's no like, it doesn't sound like there's an intense need that spins up or like a loud voice that boots up in your head at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
I mean, I think like what I'm hearing is just Owen does not sound like a neurotic person as a base. And then also I'm just hearing confidence. Your response is a response, gut is like immediate response, just like I'll get through it.
It's interesting to hear you say that because especially this weekend, I definitely did not feel confident at all.
I think that, I don't know if this term makes any sense, but the thing that comes to mind is like meta confidence.
Yeah.
Like it's not that you always show up as being super socially exuberant and broadcasting confidence, but I think that you have very strong confidence that you'll be okay. Like, I don't think that you have confidence that you're going to blow everyone's minds, but you have confidence that you'll be fine. And I mean, I think sometimes overly so in the point where on many different trips you've almost died repeatedly from like, so like I was best man for Owen's wedding, and a lot of my speech was just talking about all these situations he got himself into where he almost died. My favorite one of this is that he like almost died riding a bike down a street literally called Death Road, which is just like, if I was on a bike and I was not super confident in riding a bike and I saw a sign that said Death Road, I'd be like, oh, hell no, I'm out. Whereas I feel like you'd be like, I'll be fine. It's big bike down. And then you just got destroyed. And the hilarious thing is, I feel like you would do that again. Like, maybe you're like a little more cognizant of like path of least regret in this health perspective now, but I feel like you wouldn't fully viscerally remember the emotional impact of getting wrecked there.
Yeah, I've definitely completely already forgotten any feeling around almost dying, but I do think I care a lot more about my health, especially my physical health now that I wouldn't do something like this again.
Interesting. Do you think this is like, maybe it's a very similar thread to what we were describing before, right? Like, because I'm remembering now making this connection maybe that back in 2014, like your path of least regret then was pushing into this fear a lot. Do you think that you did it just so many times that you just have this kind of innate sense now of like, I'll probably be fine? Because you just sent it so many times, against all those. I'm imagining just in those moments, there's probably part of your brain that was like, maybe not. And you're like, I'm going to do it anyway. And it just sounds like, do you think maybe that just become routine for you?
I do think that's part of it. Talking about meta confidence reminds me of one form of confidence is confidence in yourself, in your ability to like overcome any situation. And another form of confidence is confidence in a particular skill set of yours.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have confidence in the latter, but it means that if you ever lose that skill set of yours, or if you're like an Olympic athlete and then you become disabled, then suddenly you lose all your confidence because it was tied to this skill. Versus confidence in yourself is something that just can't really be taken away. I do remember after hearing that, I tried erring more on the side of developing that form of confidence.
Nice. Yeah, what's coming up for me is one definition of like self-confidence and self-esteem I really like is that it's your reputation with yourself. Like if you've just like seen yourself overcome challenges over and over and over again, you just kind of like show yourself that, yeah, I'm someone that can overcome challenges, period. And it sounds like this definitely what you're describing has flavors of that, right? Just like you've done it so many times and you've, going back to that inner child self-dialogue, right? You just have like watched your inner child just crush it constantly on like these.
Okay, I think it's actually a really important distinction here that I don't think it's that you saw yourself crush it repeatedly. It's that you saw yourself be okay with it.
Right.
It was not that like every challenge that I'm number one, like first in the race, like everyone loves me. It's just at the end of every really intense trial you gave yourself, you're like, oh, I'm fine. Like, did triathlon, I'm prepared. I'm fine. Altitude sickness, I'm fine. Like almost out of death row, I'm fine.
That's so funny.
So it's not. That is. I think it's an important distinction.
No, yeah, it's just funny that like that's my definition of crushing it. Like in my
fine.
No, yeah. Like in my mind, my mental image of having crushed it is like you go through this challenge that's super like tough. You just come out like bloodied and battered, but you're alive. And in my mind, that's crushing it. Like no, because I get that maybe not everyone thinks, but like
I think that's not the
usual
definition. Crushing it.
Yeah. It's funny to notice that. Yeah, that's how I conceive it. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, so that's cool. Confidence.
When you said that you started tilting more towards trying to develop that kind of confidence, what did that look like? I'm asking because like I feel like most of my life I had bias way more towards the developing confidence in my skills in certain things. So I would love to spend more time working on this more self-reputation kind of confidence.
Yeah. I think it was after I heard that distinction between the two, just something clicked in my mind and the mindset changed. And it actually was helpful that I started at a very different starting point for you. I know like from your history, you've been good at a lot of things, but I think historically I've actually been very bad at a lot of things. And so it helped that I saw, okay, starting from somewhere that's pretty low on the totem pole and then being able to like climb my way up and get to a place where I'm passable has helped me see that I'm able to overcome challenges and that helped me develop the former kind of confidence once I saw that was something that was a different way of looking at confidence.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that you're probably right that having the experiences of not being at the top and just like consistently working at things and seeing that you're fine throughout that is a really important part. Like I've actually heard this many times from different people that people that are prodigies, and I'm definitely not saying everyone likes them not, but people that are prodigies typically do struggle a lot more later in life because they have no experience confronting failure. Whereas there is something very real about the strength of character you develop from repeatedly encountering failure. And I remember, I think some of it is encountering failure and some of it is just recognizing that you need a lot of grit to get through certain things. Like the story comes from mind from these two students that were in like the Canadian school system around the same time as me, that were in like the competitive programming circuit. And one of them was just an academic star across the board, was in almost every Olympiad, just like straight hundreds and everything. And for a long time, he was the one that was like top of the boards for programming competitions as well. But then slowly this other guy like just slowly chipped away at that and eventually surpassed him. And that guy, I mean, he's really smart, but he's not like, he doesn't have the same kind of general genius. He just worked really, really hard. And this first like general all-star dude eventually wrote about this experience and how he was so initially frustrated that this person that he viewed as, in some ways, this is not how he would phrase this, but I'm going to, for the purpose of the story, viewed as his intellectual inferior, but it's because the other person didn't have any preconceptions about being good at it. So when he ran into something that was hard, he wasn't frustrated by it because that was his experience the entire time. Whereas if you're consistently at the top of things, then you're used to things being easy. And when things are hard, you don't know how to react. So it sounds like from your own experiences, you're kind of used to things being hard. So you enter a new area, a new arena, and you're like middle or bottom of the class, and it's hard. You're like, this is normal. Like, I just started this thing. And it sounds like that has served you very well in establishing this clear sense of self-esteem that's not rooted or attached to your ability in any one thing. Is that right?
I think that's partly right, but I do also attribute a lot of it to the forgetting the pain part of it.
It's kind of a blessing in a way. A couple things come up for me when you're describing this. One is the lack of expectation. Once again, expectations are the root of all evil. And yeah, it's just another example in my mind of like how great it is when you can go into something without having an expectation, right? There's no expectation of things being easy, which is pretty great. Another thing that came to mind was one of the ideas from this book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving Up, is like embracing normality, right? Just like that's one of the key ideas in the book is most people are normal, and that's probably like by definition, and that's probably a good thing for you to embrace. That you're not, most people are just not that special. It's kind of another way of framing no expectations, right? Because you're a normal person, so you shouldn't expect like insane things out of yourself because you're normal. The third thing that's coming up for me is just to push on your point earlier, more specifically. This came up for me in therapy actually, as I was kind of poking into a similar related topic, and we converged on this idea that facing the possibility of failure is a skill, and getting good at being like handling yourself and your emotions in situations where you first face the possibility of failure is the thing that you can work on, which is kind of cool to think about. Because a lot of the times that's what really gets you. It's not the actual failure. Like you're probably way more resilient than you think. It's the moment when you can conceive the possibility of failure, right? Because like to push, what does it mean to encounter something that is hard for the first time? I think that if you maximally push that idea out, it's that if I attempted this thing, I can fail at it. And it's a very real possibility that I will fail at it. And that's what's really scary, because that's what ended up shaking you to your core potentially. If you always thought that you were good at programming for your entire life, like if I approach this problem and I fail at it, then what does that mean for my identity? Like I've always been the person that's good at it, right? And that's what stops them from actually even trying. Whereas you were saying like the other person in the story who has never even had that conception, right? Everything has always been hard and they've faced this possibility of failure all the time. A, they're okay with failing because they have no expectation to themselves not failing. And B, it's just their norm. And so that's where the superpower comes from, right? Over a longer period of time.
Yeah. So it sounds like from that perspective so if you think about these two different paths to confidence, one of them is confidence in your skills. The other one is confidence in your baseline okayness. The first one is about training in some skill. You get really good at a specific thing, but it's actually, you can get really far down that path without ever addressing the other one, because the other one requires the direct confrontation of the fear of failure, where you have to really put yourself in situations where you might fail. And it's really an independent skill, because at every level of actual skill, there's the option to do something that is scary enough where you might fail, but there's always the option to avoid that as well, which is really interesting, because it suggests the actual answer to my question of how do you work on this is go intentionally do things that you might fail at, which I'm not great at, but I would like to do more.
I think we're converging on the age-old wisdom of do the scary things.
Yeah, which probably lines pretty closely, at least some of the time, with path of least regret.
Yeah.
Full circle.
Full circle.
Yeah, I guess like I do view both of you as people that are very good at confronting fears, or at least not allowing fear to prevent you from pursuing a certain path. It's awesome because, there's this idea of you are the average of your 5 closest friends. You're 2 of my closest friends. So I'm hoping that I will over time just like get that push from osmosis. Yeah. Feeling gratitude for both of you for being good role models in very different ways for pushing through fear.
So to push on that a little bit for you,
Yeah.
What are some opportunities to push into this, you think, in the next, call it like month or so?
I think I really need to publish in writing. It's so most of the writing that I've put out into the world has been in one of two camps, both of which are honestly ways of me mostly dodging this fear. So the two kinds of writing I've done a lot of publicly. One of them is technical writing, where I basically show all of my work and I can have very high confidence it's correct because I can just run it through the computer and see if it puts out the same answer. And if anyone challenges me, I can literally just point at it and being like, this does the thing I said it did. I'm very confident. And the other form of writing, which people view as very vulnerable, but in another sense it's not, is me talking about my own personal lived experiences. And in a similar way, no one can really challenge me or call me, say that I'm wrong because I'm talking about my own experiences. Whereas a lot of the things that I'm interested in nowadays around climate tech, for instance, don't fall into either of these categories. It's not personal writing. It is about the objective external world, but it's also not things I can have really high confidence in. So I've been really afraid to publish things because it's very common right now that in the process of filling in the gaps for the thing I'm trying to write, I like discover that I've lost confidence in the entire point of the thing that I'm writing. And I think that part of the resistance to publishing it is just fear of like people being like, you're completely wrong. And maybe I should just lean into that and publish things and let people tell me that I'm wrong. And then just be like, thank you for explaining why I'm wrong. I'll like revise this and I can learn in the process. So that's one option that feels actually quite scary to me. That's the first one that comes to mind. I'm sure I have more, but that's the most immediate one for me.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be a lot. I think it's just doing it. One that you think, yeah, I mean, it feels like you kind of closed the loop for yourself already, like being able to label the thing. Like we talked about the possibility of fear, right? I think it's important to be able to label for yourself what that is in the specific case, which, you know, for you, it sounds like the fear of being wrong and like kind of blatantly told that in a somewhat public setting that no, incorrect. You put, 10, 20, 30 hours into writing this thing and no.
Yeah.
Like that seems pretty scary. There's also like a little bit of like public humiliation aspect to
like
it as well.
Fear of your reputation being
Yeah.
tainted.
Yeah, there's like fear of reputation, this fear of judgment. There is one fear that I actually think is warranted, which is the fear of spreading misinformation. But I think that the act way to combat that is largely just be good at following up, and then don't stop doing things as soon as I'm criticized.
Yeah, and like you also close the loop for yourself and like recognizing that like you can also see the value that lies actually from the way you're describing, like not even that far off from the fear. Just like once you're pushing through, you can already see a world where like if someone tells me I'm wrong and I just learn and I get better.
Yeah. I can already feel the like knotted up feeling of well, I can feel like the anxiety of what it will feel like when I click the button to publish. And then also the dread awaiting the criticism crawling in.
Woo! Yes. Oh my goodness. I feel like this is like some like universal creator stuff right here. Just like you publish your piece of art or your creation, and then you're like, okay, it's out in the world now. I'm going to be judged. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I hit publish on YouTube.
Yeah.
I feel that. Oof. 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 So scary. Yeah.
All right. Well, now I need some more inspiration fuel. So what's the next scary thing each of you are going to do?
I mean, I think for me, Jamie and I are on a pretty similar path. I also want to start building in public in a sense around climates. I think that one's less scary to me. The one that's more scary is the attending more conferences, meeting more people in the space, coming in as someone with zero credibility and trying to find my place in this space.
Yes, that is scary. And I still feel a bit of that fear as well. I think that I use doing a lot of research as a bit of shield for that. But I think that the people that I really respect in doing this actually go in cold. They actually like, I know nothing with this. Please tell me about this. Whereas I immediately be like, oh God, like what value am I giving this person? Like am I wasting this person's time? Yeah, I'm excited to go on the journey with you and watch you confront the harder version of it.
Just to pull on that a little bit for you, Owen, what is if you had to label the fear, what is it that you're afraid of?
Maybe like a fear of being shunned. Like, I don't think I'll,
like a fear of social rejection.
yeah, I think that's part of it.
You don't have to answer this if this is like, too intense, but just to nudge you a little bit further, like what is being shunned? Like what would it sound like?
What does it sound like me?
Just like the worst case scenario is happening. You're being shunned
Hmm.
by somebody. What are they saying to you to shun you?
Maybe it's not even what they're saying to me. It's what they're not saying to me. Like I'm just not gonna be included because I'm not worthwhile enough or like worthy enough of being in that circle.
Like exclusion.
Right.
All right. That's definitely a real fear to confront, and it's a scary thing that you're going to be doing for the next couple of months. So,
yeah, I felt that one.
Yeah, that was very real.
What am I up to?
Yeah.
I think there's two that come to mind. One is publishing more YouTube videos, and specifically like giving myself space to explore different types of content. Like when I first started the channel, it was very like career oriented, but recently I've kind of felt myself pulled to like just focus on being a better video creator, and that kind of involves just making a lot of different types of videos. And yeah, there's a ton of fear associated with that. Just like it's like judgment squared essentially, because there's the baseline judgment of I'm putting something out there into the world for everybody to judge and provide opinions on that's already very scary. And then there's also in my mind this idea that I had established an identity for myself already, and now I'm breaking out of that mold. And now I'm like, the new people coming in to see this are going to judge me, and the old people who are like already part of my viewership, maybe they also have expectations already. Am I disappointing them too now by not doing the usual? It's all just kind of, it's like one big blob of grossness that stands between me and publishing more videos and like becoming a better video creator, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one. And then the other one is like just work and like trying really hard at work. These are both tracks that I've been making progress on over the years. But at work, it's just like, it's again, the possibility of failing at the thing that pays me money is terrifying, both from an identity perspective and a perspective of like, it's what pays the bills. So yeah, but then I also know that like, if I don't try, then I'm doomed to fail if I don't try. So if you really rationally think about it, it's like your default if you don't try is to fail. Or you can try, is kind of what you were saying before, Owen. Like or you can try and then maybe you'll succeed, which seems strictly better. So it logically makes sense, but the fear is also real of like the practical aspect being like you could get fired if you mess up too much. And then the identity part being like you might have to, like, I'm afraid of confronting the reality that it might not be as good as at my job as I think I am. And that's like, the thing that I spend the most time doing.
Yeah.
Which that's heavy. So those two.
Very real. Having been fired before. Very, very real.
Yeah. It's just such a big blow to, I think, like your identity and also your self-confidence in a way. It's just very terrifying to have that looming over you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so things on both fronts here to comment on. First of all, on the video front, we're going to add a link to Kevin's most recent video in the description.
Oh,
His
no.
last video is excellent. It's so good.
Oh, man.
And it's very in line with the fear, and it's very in line with the same kind of stuff that we talk about in the pod. So like, please go watch that. It's really good. Yeah. So but then we watching Kevin's videos as he's been putting them out, and it's really clear the ways in which his delivery's gotten better, the editing's gotten better. The last one, the voicing is like really clear and like emotionally attuned. It's just good, and like it's just chock full of high quality anime references. So strongly endorsed. And then the other thing that I wanted to like point out there was I love that you're able to recognize that you're doing these two scary things simultaneously. One of just continuing to publish, and one effectively like pivoting the content or at least broadening the base of it. And I've been through similar kinds of fears of that, where most of my Twitter following, for instance, follows me for technical content. And every once in a while, I will just drop more personal things in that. And it does get way less engagement. But I know that I'm doing it for a reason. And it does still occasionally reach some of the people that were there for the technical content. And I've actually had this experience now, like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 times where someone will reach out to me and they'll be like, hey, like I found your website because you wrote about the physics of color, but then I read your post about depression and that was like way more meaningful to me. So it's like, I wonder if you're going to get people that land on your page because of the PM content, but then they get into the emotional content and you like Trojan horse them into emotional development, you know? And I hope that happens because it's sick.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool. I think they talk about the kind of the dream, I guess, for creators broadly, especially, but particularly on YouTube or anyone who tries to cultivate an audience, is you eventually hopefully just become big by being authentically you and finding people and make a community around that. And so you eventually just find your people that, you know, resonate with what you have to say and what you have to communicate across multiple dimensions of your life. So that would be very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the second thing around work, there is a really direct way in which trying really hard at something is a mechanism of confronting failure. Because if you don't try that hard, then you always give yourself this conceptual out of like, oh yeah, I could have done that.
Yeah.
But you know, I didn't want to push that hard.
That one's
so
classic.
when you're actually pushing yourself as hard as you can, that is like in itself a courageous act, because it means that if you fail, you know that like you're actually not capable of doing that. It's a really, really scary thing to confront. I think even if you don't stack, this is how I eat on top of that, but you're like you're really pushing it. So I think that those things in combination is like, yeah, you got enough scary on your plate right now. You're good without reaching for more.
Full healthy diet of confronting my fears.
You know, like the whole food pyramid of fear.
Yeah, all the food groups.
Yeah, all the groups of fear. Yeah.
Existential fear, identity fear.
Hopefully minimal physical fear.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. If I'm homeless, is that physical fear?
I'm to do more like, please be careful on your scooter.
Oh, that's true. Shouldn't fracture my toe again. Yeah. Anyway, is that a good place to wrap?
Yeah, I think it's a good place to wrap. All right, so let's do our checkout then. Owen, how are you feeling now?
Overall, I feel very satisfied. Man, feelings are hard.
Feelings are hard.
Feelings are very hard. Yeah. Another infinite skill ceiling. Skill.
Yeah, it's strange. I feel very serene, but it's like
Good word.
I started from a very energetic place. And on one hand, I do feel more energized, but at the same time, I also feel like I've been brought down a notch in my energy. Overall, I'm very appreciative of the conversation. I learned stuff about you guys. I learned stuff about myself. But it was also a very intense conversation that it's like a 5 for physical energy now and like a 9 for emotional.
Whoa, interesting.
Nice.
Interesting.
That's sick. You?
I definitely had the same kind of split. I think I'm at like around 8 emotionally right now. Feeling inspired and settled and warm emotionally. And then physically, yeah, I'm definitely tired. I'm gonna go sleep like a rock. It's gonna be great. Probably like at a 4.5.
I'm like someone trend 5 physically, but 8 pushing 9. The predominant feeling is, I don't know. I don't have words, so I will use a metaphor. It feels like I'm suiting up for battle. You know, it's like one that I have like 60% confidence that I can take. So, you know, it's like over the 50-50 line, but it's still highly questionable. So that's the feeling, excited, the balance of, I guess, excitement and anxiety as I suit up for tomorrow, I guess, is I'm going to be pushing on both of these immediately. So, yeah.
All right. I think it's a good place to wrap.
Thanks for coming on the pod, Owen.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being our first guest. Hopefully the first of many. This is fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you also for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hey. If you enjoyed this conversation, please help us by leaving a rating on your favorite podcast app. We would really appreciate it because it helps us grow and lets others find the show.
When we're not podcasting, Kevin also makes YouTube videos.
And Jamie has a blog. You can find links to these in the episode description.
The intro music you heard in this episode was made by Harry Dye.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.